welcome back to the Marhelm interview series. I'm here with Ståle Rodahl, who's the chairman of Seabird Exploration, a small but mighty seismic vessel-owning company traded on the Oslo Stock Exchange. Ståle, thanks for joining me here today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw the recent press release out of Seabird with a charter for the second vessel. It'd be great to hear a little bit. I understand Seabird has gone through a bit of a shift in strategy over the last couple of years and is now kind of stabilized in its position. And it'd be great to hear a little update from you on the state of Seabird, and then we can dive in a little bit to the seismic industry more broadly.
Yeah, no, that's right. So Seabird has been a company with has a 25-year history in the seismic markets, and has a lot of good things going for it. However, the capacity wasn't maybe optimal, for the most interesting segments as we have identified them, and also it was a little bit about right sizing the organization and achieving the right funding for the company was also an issue. So having done that, I think now we have created a very good platform. We have definitely the right type of vessels. I would say we have, if not state of the art, our vessels are at least among the most attractive ones in the segments that they're operating in. They are equipped for the most, in my opinion, the by far most interesting segment of the seismic market, which is the ocean bottom seismic market, which is growing very, very strongly, and it's done so through, and that's interesting, it's done so through all this downturn, from 2014, you see constant growth in ocean bottom seismic. So we are there, and we are the only, pure listed OBN company, ocean bottom node source, and we provide source vessel services for that. So we are the only listed company, only pure listed company within that globally. So I think that's interesting, and organization is now taken down to level. We've cut it with around 70%, so it's now down to level which is very, very competitive. And also I think it's interesting to see that we also have improved the quality of operations. There are some key metrics there in terms of downtime and so on, the utilization that you can look at, and those metrics have improved as we have reduced the workforce substantially. And I think that's interesting. It's working. And also we got bank financing for the first time in the company's history, and of course that's been also very helpful for us during the downturn, and now coming out of the downturn the last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. So the ocean bottom nodes, is that mostly for mining or also for oil and gas exploration?
Ocean bottom node is for oil and gas exploration.
Yeah.
So this is just quickly, the typical streamer or seismic surveys that people I think are familiar with offshore for offshore oil and gas exploration is the streamer surveys, 2D and 3D surveys, and PGS is very well known for its 3D streamer surveys, for example. So ocean bottom node is really a new technology, or it's not so new anymore, but it's the most recent technology that has gained traction amongst oil companies, and it involves simply placing nodes on the seabed and then shooting the signals that's being picked up by the nodes. This improves basically the image that you get of whatever is below the seabed. And combining these data with the old streamer data is particularly powerful, and also you can add the time axis in that, so you get into 4D through the time axis, and ocean bottom node has become a very useful tool in that. So this is a type of activity, as you will understand, that that goes on more around existing installations in order to, do a constant monitoring of the development of fields over time. So it's more in-field exploration, as we call it, ILX, and that puts some requirements on the vessels doing it, as they are working often very close to existing installations. So these need to be so there are high demands on the type of vessels that you can use, and ours fit the bill, and are now in strong demand with longer term contracts being signed up, which is really good news for our profitability.
Yeah, no, that's obviously great. It's good to have both the assets contracted. Yeah, so I guess I kind of thought the 2D was more of the first stage exploration, but really it's being more utilized in existing fields to kind of monitor the state of things. Or how should I think about, 2D? Obviously, it's kind of on the lower end, but it's a rapidly growing. It seems like the percentage of 2D has really gained over the last one or a few years. It seemed like it kind of went from like 10% up to 40%.
Yeah. So here we are talking about. It might be a little bit confusing because Seabird is involved in both 2D and OBN source. So our vessels are equipped to do OBN source, and both vessels over the coming year is going to do OBN source. But one of our vessels, which is the Eagle, it's a very versatile vessel. It's also equipped to do 2D. So it also has all the recording and streamer equipment on board to do streamer surveys. But really, 2D and OBN are it's like at the extreme of this axis of exploration, where 2D is the most frontier type of seismic exploration that you will do. This is very, very early in the exploration for oil and gas, right? So the 2D activities that you see now is typically in emerging markets, developing countries, that because of the whole geopolitical situation that we've seen develop in particular over the last few years, has now become more aware of their own energy situation, and they are looking to become more self-sufficient on energy. So what they do is that they start with 2D. So you are right in that demand for 2D has gone up. Most people expected this to be more or less an obsolete technology, and that the 3D would be, but because of this development, energy security being really a theme in developing countries, you're seeing you're seeing more 2D activity develop. That is helpful for half of our capacity, which is also then equipped for 2D. And we have had quite a lot of 2D work, I would say, over the last 2 years for that vessel. So without having the number on the top of my head, I would say probably 2/3 at least of the time shooting for that vessel has been 2D. Now that vessel has got a longer or quite a long-term OBN contract. So, but we still have the equipment, so we can, if we find another vessel, we will move the equipment from the Eagle to another vessel, and we will do 2D with our equipment on another vessel. But so, 2D is at the, call it the exploration extreme, the early part of the exploration. Now, OBN is at the other extreme, I would say. It's at the, so OBN is something that is, and this is why you've seen the structural demand growth, even if the seismic cycle from 2014 had a vicious downturn. You can ask PGS about that, I think, the demand for their 3D streamers. But OBN has really been growing through all this period. And the reason for that is the need and the wish for the oil companies to really get more out of existing reserves. So frontier exploration is less on the agenda for these companies now. Returning cash to shareholders, holding back on spending, and all these things has been the trend in the oil companies over the last few years. And using OBN then as an exploration tool means that you're able to do it close to existing installations, so you can capitalize on investments that has already been made, right? So tying in with existing infrastructure. So it's really at the two extremes of the seismic, exploration, the timeline, if you like.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, just given, seismic. I had a conversation on it last summer, and at that time, everyone was saying, "Hey, seismic's a late cycle part of the offshore play. Why are you talking about seismic?" And then, of course, there was the TGS PGS merger deal, and so there was a good investment opportunity there for people that had been invested. Now it's kind of still a similar landscape. A lot of the offshore driller equities, haven't really worked as quickly as some of the investors have hoped. And so in people's mind, we're still not in that kind of late cycle offshore play yet. But I'm not sure that this cycle seismic is going to be as much of a late cycle play. Traditionally, once the E&P companies make a bunch of money, then they start, spending money on exploration. And then, in turn comes the seismic. But,
Yep.
As you're describing, it seems like, it's a little bit different this time. And so, how has the landscape changed now with the obviously with the large, kind of gorilla in the room being the big merger between the two seismic players? There's really been no order book or really any sort of growth in this sector, mostly just massive contraction. So it does seem like kind of an interesting time to be looking at the sector.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just in terms of the cyclicality and so on, I guess, historically what you've seen is that seismic is actually an early cycle play. So
Right.
first comes the seismic, then comes the drilling, right? So
right, in theory, I guess most people just remember at the end of the last cycle, everyone started, looking for new oil and spending a bunch on seismic. But right, the proper order of operation should be look for the seismic for the oil, then produce the oil.
Yeah, exactly. And then, seismic is cheaper than drilling and all this. So there are these arguments. But what I think is really interesting and where I agree with you is that because of the strong growth in OBN, which is now more than 40% of all the seismic spend, you can say that you have changed that cyclicality somewhat in terms of that the ILX type of work from the oil companies isn't early cyclical in its in that way. It's a type of activity that you could say, I mean, first you have the oil price, right? And as long as you have that, and as long as you have cash available for spend, this is something that will be done. So probably less cyclicality and less tied up to any part of the cycle, if you see what I mean. So you could very well call it later cyclical, if you like. But I think it's more than cyclicality. We're talking about the structural change in demand from the oil companies and their understanding of what they can get out of existing reserves. And this is where OBN comes to play. And this is really why you've seen this demand growth, as strong as it has been. We're talking about a segment of the market that has been growing more than 20% per year, even through the cyclical downturn. So, wow. the numbers tell you that there is a shift going on here in demand from the oil companies that is benefiting the OBN players. And of course, there is a reason that TGS chose to acquire Magseis, which is the leading OBN company, or was the leading OBN company, at that time, with probably around a 50% market share. And TGS has now got hold of that company, and they are capitalizing strongly on their own balance sheet, which you could say was the weak point of Magseis, really to ramp up activity even further. And I don't know, the joint venture that was announced between TGS and Schlumberger, or SLB as it's now called, last year, where they are combining the streamer data in the Gulf of Mexico, really gives TGS a really good and exciting platform to start covering all of Gulf of Mexico, or at least the parts that they want, with OBN data on top of the streamer data, because they now have access to all those data. So, and that's really good news for anyone providing services to the OBN companies, call it the project companies. We are one such supplier providing OBN source services, and that's just really good news for us. And I think just tie in the latest contract, as you talked about that, because the Fulmar, it's very well known. It's shooting in the Gulf of Mexico, and has been doing so now for some time. And we expect it to continue to be there. And now the Eagle, we have announced that it's got the contract in the Western Hemisphere. But I think most people, and you will see that in a couple of weeks, most people would be guessing that the Western Hemisphere is over there. So so that just, you're just seeing the surge of activity and capacity moving in to that region. But OBN is also growing other places. So it's really, as I see it, it's really more about the capacity issue. Now that you have strong players like TGS, that has entered this market and is able to do more, it is really a capacity issue more than anything else, in order to see how fast OBN will grow.
Yeah. So just so I understand it correctly, you guys are chartering your vessels and assets basically into other kind of seismic players for them to use in their broader operations. Is that correct?
Yes. So we are.
You're a provider into the market.
Yeah. So Seabird comes from a situation where our traditional clients used to be the oil companies. Right. They were requiring our services directly. And this is still the case, mostly, I would say, in the streamer market. This is the case. The OBN market that has now come into play, let's say, over the last 15 years or so, and really growing strongly over the last 10 years as costs have come down, and this has become a more attractive product for the oil companies. What you've seen then is that you have a new layer of players that has entered the seismic market because of the basically because of the nature of the OBN projects, where you need to tie in several different players and equipment in order to make these surveys. So there is a new kind of echelon, in the value chain, and these are what we call the OBN companies. We are an OBN source company. We provide source services with our vessels. But the integrated OBN players like Magseis that TGS bought is a company that basically bids on the entire project, from an oil company or offer to an oil company, and put together the various source services, being ours, which is a source vessel. You also need a node vessel, to handle the nodes. And then you need the nodes themselves, which is a particular type of equipment, and where there's also quite a lot of technology development going on. And not least, so this is, as you understand, seismic, or these type of services is a lot about logistics. And when you multiply the number of service companies that you use, the logistics in this just multiplies as well. So these companies have really been set up to handle that, and so they are now our clients, typically in OBN, rather than directly with the oil company.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, because there's only, was there like 40 seismic vessels in the world or something? I mean, there's not that many of these vessels in the world. And now, I mean, we're doing, Gulf of Mexico, North Sea, all the legacy fields are still strong. Guyana has a ton of oil, but then it's, all through Africa now. There's new discoveries every day, it feels like. Southeast Asia. So, I mean, the world for oil exploration seems to be getting bigger and bigger. And, these vessels have to, travel between fields and everything. So it's quite fascinating because it's been such a sector that's been so written off. But, with these contracts being given, I would be curious. I mean, as an investor, a lot of people feel, they probably don't understand the dynamic. They might feel as if, well, if you're chartering your vessel into another kind of seismic vessel owner, maybe one day they'll find another vessel and not need your vessel or something. So what's kind of and then, the new contract is 6 months with extension periods, which is great. But, what's the likelihood, or, how do you guys think about the optionality in those contracts and the likeliness that they'll continue? It sounds like the vessel's been operating in the Gulf of Mexico for some time. So it seems like there's a pretty steady flow for that asset.
Yeah, I think so. I was talking about the quality of the vessels, and there are certain metrics that you want these vessels to.
2009 is pretty. That's pretty young for a seismic vessel.
Yeah, it has been. It's funny. A vessel that is now 15 years old is a young vessel, so it speaks volumes about the lack of replacement activity in the sector. And rates need to go up a lot before you see replacement. So, and we would welcome that, and we still see no reason why the rates wouldn't go up a lot. But to your question about the competitiveness of our vessels and how we're thinking about that going forward. I mean, first of all, yeah, they are modern. These are amongst the most modern vessels out there. I can mention that there is a vessel from 1988 that is still shooting. So I think our vessels have a long way to go. And the alternative then would be to start to build new capacity. And if that happens, rates go up a lot. And then we are the first to benefit from that anyway, because we have vessels in the market. So I'm not afraid of new building activity as such. I think that would create a very interesting dynamic in the cycle. But then, of course, then you would be into the normal cyclicality, where the supply side always is affecting, the prospects for vessel owners like ourselves the most. It is the supply side usually that really changes the paradigm, right? It's not so much that the demand swings a little bit, but mostly swings upward. But the supply side can really change the business dynamics and change them for a long period of time. But anyway, to begin with, if that happened, it would be really good news for us, because it means that day rates would have to go up a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So meanwhile, before that happens, we have, as I said, I don't know if I would call them state of the art, but let's do that. Let's say that at least we have, the Fulmar, I think we can say, is maybe the top vessel in the world. At least she's a top 2 or 3 vessel of the OBN vessels. And you mentioned 40 seismic vessels. In the OBN market, there are only 18 vessels. 18 vessels. And Fulmar is a top 2 or 3 vessel. And I think
that's basically one for every oil field, less than one for every oil field, major oil field.
Yeah. So, and I think that's interesting. Just let me put it in perspective. The fleet has been reduced by more than 60% over the last 5 years, while demand has been growing 20% per year. So you can imagine the tightness that is developing in this market. So the Fulmar is a top 2 or 3 vessel. There are 18 in total. We are therefore really, really confident that she is going to continue to be employed in OBN for as long as there is OBN. And judging by I talked about the TGS SLB deal and other areas of the world as well. So judging by what we're seeing, OBN is going to continue to grow for many, many years, actually. There's structural growth here. So I think that's good news. The evidence of what I'm saying that it's holding true is really that she entered OBN market with or first she was on a 3-month contract. I think for the client just to know her a little bit better. Then she entered a 1-year contract, which is unusual length and was unusual, particularly at the time. It was unusual length for this vessel. This was in 2022.
Yeah.
And after the 1-year contract, she went directly on to a 2-year contract with the same client. So I think this is evidence of what I'm talking about. The contract length for the vessel is actually increasing, and she's been constantly employed since she came to the market. When it comes to the Eagle, it's a little bit different configuration without getting into the technicals here too much. Also, she is, as I said, equipped also for 2D. So it's a little bit different equipment on her. It's easy to change if we want to change it, so we can do that. But the Eagle is then, I would say, a top 5 or 6 vessel worldwide. So that means that we have 2 of the top 6 vessels. We have around 30% just with the 2 vessels. We have 30% of the high end of the OBN market, really.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I read through some of the reporting, and as an investor, and Marhelm is a community of maritime and commodity focused investors, and I saw that beautiful line that says, management expects to distribute the majority of cash flow to the shareholders, and so that's kind of pivoting gears a little bit here, but so now that you're set up kind of with these contracts, I saw you've paid a dividend, last quarter. Should people kind of expect the dividend policy to change a little bit with the new contract, or how are you guys thinking about things in terms of that? It's a great policy to have. Companies that have put that style in place, are obviously quite popular with investors.
Yeah. So so the way we think about it is that I talked a little bit about financing. We have that in place. We have paid down almost half our bank debt just over the last few months here. So now there's not really any point to continue to aggressively pay that down. So in terms of capital allocation, we have been very clear on this, and that is that all excess cash in the company, without jeopardizing the balance sheet, of course, all excess cash will be used for, or will be distributed to our shareholders. And we started doing that with the 0.25 per share that we announced in I guess it was in February, and that will be paid out in just a couple of weeks or 2 or 3 weeks from now. And then when the Eagle starts working, which we have said is the latter half of June, we will be in a situation again where the company generates substantial amounts of cash. The Fulmar is working; it is covering everything, and there is some profit. But when the Eagle starts contributing, there is really a lot of free cash, and a quite rapid free cash buildup. So. So the board is going to take a decision there on every quarterly report. We will take a decision and announce to the market what type of dividend distribution we are seeing.
No, that's great. So it sounds like things have kind of stabilized at the company. You joined, maybe just a little bit of the history, which I think would be interesting for the audience. So, you had a long career in asset management and banking. But then what kind of led you to get involved with Seabird back in 2019? Obviously, right before the world changed a bit in 2020. It's clearly been an interesting few years. So I would just be interested to hear a little bit about how you got into the seismic industry originally.
All right. Well, actually, I have a long history in the seismic industry, but
Okay.
I mentioned I started out as an analyst and in oil and gas, and through that work, I was also involved in when PGS was created. This is back in around 1990, 1991, and yeah, was on the deal team basically that helped Norsk Vekst and Radar Michaelsen at the time to set up PGS from with the starting point being Geo team then. So we got involved and got a very good understanding of seismic from seeing this, call it, from the inside, and has been an analyst on the seismic sector for many years in the past. Now in 2019, what happened is that I hadn't researched the seismic sector for many years then, but in 2019 I participated in a deal, an equity raise that Seabird Exploration did, and I quickly realized that things weren't exactly as I had been told at the time of the capital raise. I got a little bit worried and asked for a meeting with the chairman and the CEO, and got even more worried after that meeting. So to make a long story short, I then took a seat on the board of directors, and very soon after, I took a position as executive chairman in the company. And so, as you understand, this was an investment that didn't go the way I thought it would. And normally investors vote with their feet, right, and just get out of it. But I was a little bit disturbed by what I saw, and I think, and my understanding then from the past of the seismic industry was such that I felt that it was possible to do something here with this company. So I didn't just want to give it up, and yeah, so that's how it started. And then from that, it's just been a lot of hard work. It's been 2 years of really tough restructuring. As I said, 70% of the people left. We had to scrap vessels. I think I can also mention that we got, which I think is it's an interesting point. We also obtained bank financing for the company for the first time ever. We did so in April of 2020, when the oil prices at times were negative. So, and I have been told that we were the only oil service company with new bank financing then from years from 2018 or something.
Right? The analyst probably got a strong speaking to a day or two later, but that's great.
Yeah, so that was really good. And then you know, of course, you can't just cut costs and so on, but we really spent a lot of time just getting the company right in terms of quality of vessels, quality of equipment, but it's also about, I would say, quality of operation. Is the way we do things, which is different now. It's our operating model is different, and but you also need the market, of course, to capitalize on this. And that was really the point we couldn't do much about. And fortunately, the market came to us in, I would say, from 22, early 23, and we have been able to capitalize on it really nicely with contracts that are unusual, both in length and also I can say that they are leading in terms of day rates. So, which is a really nice combination. Usually you have to give one to get the other, but our contracts are really good on both accounts. So I think in brief, that is the history we've been through, and we are just really pleased that we are now able to start to pay back to our patient shareholders.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, starting your career on a seismic deal, now, you know, working on the back end of your career on seismic, you know, what kind of lessons did you learn along the way, maybe, that helped guide through some of these cycles?
Yeah. So the lesson
from a lot of different seats, I feel like.
Yeah. there are a lot of learnings here, but I would say one thing is there is no need. There is so much risk in this industry. You don't need to add to that risk by taking on undue risk, like not knowing if you're going to sell whatever you make. Know that you have clients for it. I think that is a very very good rule. I think counterparty risk also is something that you quickly learn about in this industry, and we have been very focused on that. Fortunately, it's worked well for us. And then I think it really has to do with getting maximum out of the contracts that you signed by very thorough planning. You can't give it, because there are so many ways the cash you earn can find its way in this industry that I can't even start talking about it. So you need to make sure that you have planned properly, so you're able to obtain the cash and spend it the way you like, and not see it disappear in holes that you haven't planned for.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, as an investor, it's easy to forget when you think about, assets and paying out returns to shareholders. It's easy to forget about the product that's being created with these, giant vessels going to 30,000 foot offshore wells and, shooting seismic to see what the oil fields look like under the ground. I mean, all the technology and, just it's almost like magic, really. So, I mean, it's easy to forget kind of just what it's like when you're actually at the company, where you have to worry about the operations and safety on board vessels and, the people that go into that. Sometimes we boil it down to just the pluses and the minuses when we look at the stock here and there, but it's really amazing the product that comes out of the industry.
Right. Yeah, it is. And thanks for mentioning the people. I should have added that first, actually. That I think is a key risk, and also a key formula for success. Make sure you have the right people with you.
Yeah. Well, Ståle, I appreciate you taking some time to speak with us today. Seabird sounds like it's in good hands with someone with your experience and insight as the chairman. So, we look forward to following the story and keeping an eye on the seismic sector and y'all's progress as the second ship starts her contract later this summer.
All right. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
And again, thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.